And we are back on the 0 hour. And so is that echo in my headset. No, I think it's gone now. Okay. It's great to have you back. Thanks for sticking with us through the break. And our next guest is Josh Eidelson, who does a lot of great reporting for Salon on the labor beat, as well as politics and inequality, which ought to keep you pretty busy. Josh, are you with us? Josh is not with us yet. Okay. Basically, what I wanted to talk to Josh about was his recent interview with Senator Alan Simpson. Now, Alan Simpson, like Abby Huntsman, is part of this small group that seems obsessed with the idea that Social Security is in crisis, number one. Number two, that Social Security is part of our overall budget crisis. And number three, that the solution for that is to keep taxes low for the wealthiest among us and for corporations while at the same time hitting the middle class with destructive cuts. And yet he's supposed to be a wonderful character. That's the talk in Washington. He comes across very differently if you're not part of the insider group. But I understand that Josh is with us now. Josh, are you on the line?
I am. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks so much for coming in. You do a lot of great work at Salon, and I read your stuff religiously. But so we would have wanted you on at some point anyway, but I just couldn't resist talking to you about Alan Simpson. Apparently, I read with great interest your piece on Simpson, and apparently you actually managed to have an audience with the great man. Is that right?
I did. I talked to him by phone, and it was an interesting conversation.
Now, of course, interesting can mean many things. It's one of my favorite euphemisms too. But he can be abrasive. In fact, he's known for being abrasive, nasty, contrary, and especially given to rages when someone challenges him on on the facts. Let's say. At first, I just out of curiosity, how did you get him?
I had
Did you?
reached out previously around during the fight over the government shutdown and had not gotten through. And this time he was back in the news again, actually, for his support for gay marriage rights, which is to his credit. And that created an opportunity to reach out again. And in this case, I was put in touch and very glad to be able to connect with him, given that Senator Simpson is someone who not only the media, but also the President of the United States have elevated to be a person of unfortunate influence in the debates that take place about the budget and the debt.
Right. I mean, look, from what I can tell, and a lot of this stuff is secretive, but I've done my own digging and research on the Peterson Foundation and the other groups working to cut Social Security. And I think Alan Simpson, besides being a child of privilege himself, has been in their employ off and on for some time. But it appears that way. It's hard for me to verify, but he's certainly been pushing that line of thinking, which you correctly characterize as unfortunate. And since Alan Simpson has come out in favor of gay marriage, I'd just be interested in your thoughts. I've felt for a while now that the liberal wing of the oligarchy has decided to use marriage equality and other individual rights issues as the way to put a liberal gloss on, sure, gays can marry each other as long as we still control the money. Now, I'm curious to know if you agree with that or if you think I'm being overly dark in my interpretation.
Well, I would say two things. I would say, on the one hand, that the issue of people's ability, regardless of their sexuality, to get all of the tremendous economic as well as social and cultural benefits that come with marriage in the United States, if they want them, is tremendously important. That's not to say that it is more important than issues like employment discrimination, which haven't gotten as much attention, either from the media or arguably from LGBT groups. And so I think it would, not to say that you are, but it would be a mistake to discount the significance of some of these issues and the tremendous progress that we've seen there. That said, it is certainly the case that if you are a major corporation in the United States, then you have much less to fear from gay people being able to marry each other and get recognition than from gay workers being able to organize and win protections in collective bargaining agreements and actually take away some of your power to control what happens there, or your power to control not only people's sexuality, but people's gender performance, people's speech outside of the workplace, all kinds of things that corporations would like to have in their discretion, whether they exercise it in a right-wing way or in a middle-of-the-road way. And it is interesting to notice, and I've written about this at Salon before, including in critiquing Frank Bruni's take on Liz Cheney, that issues of gay marriage get talked about even by somewhat mainstream media outlets in a way as though they were fundamentally moral issues that is in contrast to the lens that things like food stamp cuts get talked about in a lot of media coverage.
Right, and absolutely. I think we're on exactly the same page, and I certainly was not suggesting for a moment that those things aren't critically important, but rather that I think on the liberal-ish spectrum of corporate influence and so on, that it's been decided that that's one that can be given away pretty much for free, and hope that people will be satisfied with that and not with addressing some of the other issues. And it constantly makes me think of, for example, Dr. Martin Luther King, who throughout his career to the very end never separated economic issues from issues of civil rights, because he understood that, as he put it, the right to sit at the lunch counter doesn't mean much to me if I don't have the money to pay for the meal. So that was my only point there. So I think we're in the same agreement. What would you say were your big takeaways in your interview with Simpson? Was he uninformed? Was he defensive? Was he courteous? What was the big takeaway for you?
Well, I was struck by the number of questions that Senator Simpson did not really answer. I opened the interview by asking about why he is devoting his energies, and including energies directed at my generation, to the issue of the debt and getting us concerned about the debt rather than climate change or about mass unemployment. And he engaged in what you might call a bit of senior splaining towards me about how when he was my age, he was a knucklehead and so forth. But he didn't say anything about why climate change or mass unemployment is not a more urgent issue than the U.S. government debt. Similarly, when I asked about whether we should avoid raising the Social Security retirement age faster than life expectancy is actually going up for large swaths of people, at least as measured when you look at people who make it to 65, he didn't answer that question. Instead, he started talking about overall ratios and how they've changed. But the issue that actually, in the period of time that already we saw this increase of 2 years, we saw an increase of less than that in the life expectancy of male workers who retired at 65 in the bottom half of the income distribution. He didn't really address. He also didn't address my question about why in a deficit reduction report you would actually cap the amount of revenue that the government can take in. A lot of us intuitively would think the last thing you would want to do in a report about how to reduce the amount of money the government owes would be to cap the amount of money that the government is allowed to take in.
Well, absolutely. I mean, to me, they're always saying government should think more like a business, which is a stupid idea. But that aside, and I was in business. No business I ever worked for, no corporation I ever worked for said, let's put out our plan for the next 5 years and let's make sure we have a maximum amount of revenue that we can earn during that point of view. I mean, I think that's not thinking like a business. Here's we only have about a minute left, but here's my money, the key moment for me in your interview with Simpson, where you began by pointing out that all his doomsday scenarios so far haven't come true. And then you said, and he rambles incessantly around the point of that one, I thought, a verbal equivalent of Brownie in motion, I would say. And then he says, is there any indicator that makes you think that your scenario is more likely or closer now than when you were testifying in 2011? He begins by saying, I have no idea. And to which the logical follow up that we're all too curious to answer is, then why are you talking? Of
Right.
number one, but number two, then he starts to use his grotesque breast analogies and milk and all that for programs that people have paid for. So, first of all, it was a great scoop to get him. But do you agree with me that that was kind of the key moment there? And
It was
what should people's takeaway be?
it was quite striking to me. It was really quite striking, and it is interesting whether you're looking at this supposed creditor nightmare that never happens, or you're talking about the Iraq War. That what gets you considered or no longer considered a serious person is striking, and there are some kinds of predictions you can constantly make and not really seem to suffer for it. I do also think, though, that something that I was surprised didn't get more attention in the response to this piece was the comment that type 2 diabetes, the most common form of diabetes, is mostly self-induced. I think well captures who it is that gets blamed in a lot of these debates and the kind of attitude and, frankly, contempt that gets directed at a lot of non-wealthy people in the United States, and also the less than tight relationship with science and empiricism of some of the people who wield a lot of influence over these debates.
Well, of course, he's absolutely right. And I think we can close with that, that we're dealing with a mentality that says, how dare you, as a U.S. citizen, develop a essentially genetic disease without my level of income? You're a member of the 47%, my friend. So we'll have to leave it at that. But Josh Eidelson, reporter for Salon, thanks so much for coming and joining us on the Zero Hour.
Thank you very much.
And we will be right back after this.